So they're trying to pretty much rebuild the city from the center out and try to create those opportunities that young professional like myself, would be, very excited about.
We just opened up a $5.5 million renovation of an historic bank building at 173 Main Street that's going to be the home of CGI, as well as Colby for the foreseeable future, and have some new retail in there. Across the street, we've got a $25.5 million student apartment complex. We're going to be building a hotel, a 42-room boutique, 4-diamond independent hotel at the southern end of the street.
Obviously, there's a lot of construction going on right now, so that's physical change. But I think that there's, an emotional change. There's a spark in the air in Waterville of everybody working together to create something bigger and better in the new Waterville.
We're seeing a number of collaborators converge and create on this region, and that ranges from state partners, philanthropic associations, the Harold Alfond Foundation, for example, Colby College, and really helping to shepherd in wonderful projects and, frankly, world-class, global, wonderful companies like CGI. CGI, what's been probably so impressive is the level of involvement. Great jobs, great people make great cities. And CGI is supremely involved in that, almost at every metric.
CGI is a game changer in Waterville because it is a large company in a small community. We're involved with KV Connect, which is the local entrepreneurships in Waterville. We've got Tech Night going on. We're doing the Startup and Create Week. It's focused on startup food economy. We do a code at school over to Thomas College. We've done pitch competitions up to Colby. We love going to the Waterville Opera House and supporting what they're doing.
We take a sense of pride in everything that we do, not only at work, but in the community. That translates into the work that we do. Between the efforts of CGI, Colby, Thomas, and some of the local colleges, sky's the limit to grow this area and to grow this center. To be right at the forefront of it and be participating in all the events and the local happenings, it's something else.
It's about being local and being part of something instead of just being, a separate entity that came in. It's about connecting with people, connecting with the community. We're here because we love this community and, we want to see this community thrive and be all it can be. It is a tremendous place to be, and it's the place where you want to be right now at this very moment.
Welcome to October's Tech Night. Please feel free to get comfortable if you prefer to stand or sit. There's a high top here. Get comfortable. Food, pizza, as usual. Again, thank you so much for coming to October's Tech Night. It's wonderful to see everybody. As usual, you can find us on Facebook or online at centralmaine.org at the Tech Night tab. I would like to begin with thanking our sponsors for this evening. This free event is presented by Central Maine Growth Council and is sponsored by CGI, Thomas College's Harold Alfond Institute for Business Innovation, Valley Beverage is bringing you your delicious drinks this evening, and of course Bricks Co-working and Innovation Space here at 10 Water Street in downtown Waterville. Thank you so much to Bricks. In addition, I'd like to say hello to the folks watching at home or online. This Tech Night is being streamed live and can be viewed on Crossroads TV channel 1301. And thank you to Chad and his team and the technology that supports it. This evening's Tech Talk is a special one, and I think folks will really enjoy it. The title is Innovation and Tech Funding, How Maine Technology Institute is Changing the Way It Funds and Supports Innovation in the State of Maine, by Mr. Brian Whitney, President of MTI. This talk will cover the fact that there are no more deadlines, no more silos, no rigid program boundaries. MTI has simplified its funding approach into a process tailored to the applicant's needs, thereby maximizing its impact borne by promoting and supporting innovation in the following technology sectors: biotechnology, composites and advanced materials, environmental technologies, forest products and ag, information technology, marine technology and aquaculture, and precision manufacturing. Discover the flexibility of MTI's new funding approach. Has it opened up a new funding opportunity for you? So without further ado, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and I'll pass it over to you, Brian. Sure. And
we should bring some more chairs up for everyone, or is that good?
we got some standers. Feel free to move around as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Hey. So good evening, everybody. Thank you, Kim and Garvin and Elaine, for inviting me to Central Maine Tech Talk to talk a little bit about the Maine Technology Institute. MTI, for those who don't know, how many people know what MTI is and know what it does? So good, almost everybody. That's great. I don't always get that kind of a reception at events. MTI was created by the Maine legislature back in 1999 and was really created to help catalyze innovation and research and development in the private and public sectors. MTI has, why don't I start with this quote actually. So I always like to start talks like this with this quote. It's by Steve Case. I don't know if people know who Steve Case is, but he was the co-founder of America Online. For those of you who are my age, probably was your first email that you ever had. Case was CEO of America Online when it was valued at $163 billion, was the highest performing stock of the 1990s, was worth more than Ford and General Motors combined, and had 22 million subscribers. Several years ago, he wrote a book called The Third Wave, which is the third wave of the internet. He wrote about the Internet of Things. And this quote really spoke to me because it really exemplifies what MTI is all about. He talks about how government it plays a really important role in innovation in our society. And the key part that I wanted to emphasize here is really the second half of the last sentence, which, you know, he talks about how government's role should not be to ensure the success of innovation and entrepreneurship, but should help mitigate risk. And really that's the role that MTI plays in the state of Maine, helping Maine businesses and entrepreneurs mitigate risk. So MTI's core mission is to diversify and grow Maine's economy by encouraging, promoting, stimulating, and supporting innovation and its transformation into new products, new processes, new companies, and ultimately the creation of quality jobs for Mainers. Over the past 18 years, MTI's invested $260 million in public funds. As I mentioned, MTI is a publicly funded entity. That $260 million helped leverage $1 billion in private sector matching funds, and it's had an enormous economic impact across the state of Maine. This past fiscal year, ending June 30, was MTI's most successful to date, really by a long shot. Typically, MTI invests about $6 to $10 million a year across the state of Maine. This past year, we invested $58 million. That was due in large part to a $45 million research and development infrastructure bond that MTI was asked to administer on behalf of the state. That bond was deployed as a grant program per the legislative mandate, went out as grant funds. So MTI issued a solicitation last September seeking proposals for this funding. We ended up getting about 200 proposals seeking in aggregate $400 million. We had $45 million to deploy. We went through a rigorous due diligence process, ultimately funded 18 projects, and those projects, according to an independent economic impact analysis, will create 5,350 jobs over the next 3 years and generate $1.4 billion in economic impact. And those projects will have a substantial impact on the economy from North Berwick to Bangor, from Western Maine all the way to down east. So those projects were varied and diverse. So MTI's funding goals are really keyed in on three things. We're looking for projects that are going to help have some impact in the state through the creation or retention of quality jobs, the growth and acceleration of revenues, and the leveraging of private sector capital. All of MTI's funding, again, because we're helping to mitigate risk, goes out as a one-to-one match on private sector funds, so a minimum one-to-one match. MTI's funding is intended to help projects move along the innovation continuum. So when we talk about the innovation process, we're talking about, idea, the innovative concept, through research, development, finding a market, and commercializing, through sustainability. So the ways we do this is we fund all sorts of different things like basic business research around your innovative concept, market research, prototype development, proof of concept work, all the way through, like I said, commercializing your product and finding a market for it. Garvin alluded to our new funding approach. In the past, we had deployed our funds through a suite of different programs. They all had, pretty rigid requirements and prohibitions on how money could be used. They all came with their own separate deadlines, some monthly, some 3 times a year. If somebody missed a deadline, especially on the 3-time-a-year program, you're waiting another 4 months till you can apply. Not very nimble or entrepreneurial for businesses. So we've really changed the way we deploy our funds. Now all of our funding is really tailored to what the entrepreneur and business needs. But another key distinguishing aspect of the new approach is the things that we fund don't necessarily have to be R&D focused. So if we're looking at a project and we identify that sales is a particular challenge for this company and the product that they're trying to develop, we could potentially help provide some funding to bring on additional talent in that respect. So we've talked a lot about funding. MTI helps in a number of different ways. So in terms of funding, we offer grants, loans, as well as equity investments. We actually take stakes in some companies, and on occasion we get investment returns, which is great. We also sponsor events across the state of Maine. Our statute requires that we work to make sure there's a complementary system of supports out there for entrepreneurs and small businesses. So MTI is not expected to be the one-stop shop for everything. We're here to help provide some innovation funding and services, but we're also trying to work with partners to make sure that services are being supplied to innovators throughout the state in every, all sorts of different areas. Thomas College, for example, is doing a great job, and Mike Duguay's here is doing a great job with entrepreneurship these days. And the Top Gun program is now going to be operated, one of the locations is going to be operated out of Thomas. The Top Gun program, for those who don't know, is kind of a virtual incubator or accelerator for small businesses. And MTI helped fund that program some time ago when it first started. We also provided additional funding to help them expand to different parts of the state. So that's another example of ways we deploy funds to make sure there's a complementary system of supports out there. So key requirements for MTI's funding. So we're looking for those shared goals. So projects or companies that are looking to create or retain jobs, increase revenues, leverage matching funds. Those are the key requirements. We're looking for projects that are working on the innovation continuum. So like I said, somebody who's working through from idea through commercialization and sustainability. So idea, research, development, commercialization, sustainability. So that's really the continuum where we're funding projects. Organizations need to be Maine-based, or they need to commit to having a significant base of operations here. This past year, MTI provided some funding, for example, to a Montana company that's looking to establish a significant base of operations in the state of Maine. It's a cross-laminated timber company. It's the first company in the United States to commercially manufacture cross-laminated timber. They're interested in gaining a greater share of the market on the East Coast. So they're looking at Maine. MTI made an award. It's our expectation that they will commit to coming to Maine before the end of the year and hopefully be up and running next year. But that's an example of how MTI can use its funding to help attract businesses to the state. And no MTI funding, by the way, will go out until they're here, established. We haven't put any money out the door yet. As Garvin said, MTI funds projects within the 7 targeted technology sectors. Those are set in statute, so the legislature identified those some 20 plus years ago. And Garvin did a good job providing an overview, so I don't have to commit to memory those sectors, but just to go over them briefly again, because I think I'm going to have time. Biotechnology is one, composites and advanced materials, environmental technologies, forest and agricultural technology, information technologies, marine and aquaculture technology, and precision manufacturing. Those are the 7 sectors that we fund. What we've found traditionally is that most innovation occurs at the cross-section of 2 or more of those sectors. So, it's been my, I've been at MTI now a little over 4 years, and I don't think we've had a project presented to us that we couldn't figure out how to fund and fit into one of these technology sectors. So they're pretty broad. And finally, it's the matching funds component. So we require that anybody we invest in comes up with at least $1 for every dollar MTI invests, and typically they're putting more skin in the game than that. Again, Garvin mentioned our new investment process. As I alluded to earlier, we had all of these different programs. We had different MTI staff people managing the different programs. Somebody would come in for a $25,000 grant and deal with one of our staff people They would work through reporting and everything with that individual, and then when they were ready to scale operations and look for additional funding from MTI, they dealt with a different staff person and had to start the process essentially all over again. It was not the best business model that we could have deployed. We've moved to a new process where it's a relationship model. You come into MTI for a small amount of money, you get a designated staff person, and you keep that person all the way through, much like a bank does. So I think it's a much better model and be a lot better for the entrepreneurs and businesses. But our new process, there's a lot more automation than there used to be. We used to, when you were interested in seeking funding for your project, you would typically call MTI. We've got a staffer who does business development. We'd assign you to Joe, and Joe would hook up with you at some point, and he'd direct you to some other staffer. It was an imperfect system. So now we've introduced some automation. Really the starting point for any MTI inquiry now is our website. On our website, there's a bunch of information, but the key thing at mainetechnology.org, in the top right-hand corner is a tab that says "Ready to Start?" ? You click on that. There's a electronic intake form. Takes less than 5 minutes. Asks some really basic information about who you are, what your innovation is, and what you're looking for from MTI. And really that triggers the whole process. Our team, we're a team of 11. We get together every day at 11:30. And we look at the intakes that we got the previous day. We assign it to different staff people. We call it our morning huddle. And so we get together, we assign all these things. We've been getting on order about 3 a day, different. We haven't really marketed this to any great extent. Although today there was a story in the Press Herald, so I expect the floodgates may open now. But we've been getting about 3 a day, assigning those. The person who filled out the intake gets an automated response from us, an email that says, within 2 business days, you'll hear from an MTI staffer. And it lets them know who the staffer is. Our staff reaches out, makes contact with them, either by phone or in person. And what we do at this point is take them through a venture investment readiness assessment tool. So we've got this tool that was developed by Village Capital, which is really a venture investment tool to help investors look at companies and determine how advanced they are and how investable they are. So this is really a change for us. We've never done anything like this before. Now everybody who comes in the door gets one of these assessments. There's 8 different criteria that we're looking at, from team to product to value proposition to market. And on this scale, we're looking for somebody, in order for somebody to be a fit for MTI funding, we're really looking for them to at least attain a 1 across each of these 8 areas. And then there's 9 different levels on this scale. So as people come in, folks that are 1s generally are going to get smaller amounts of money. Folks who are higher on the scale will generally be willing to put more money out the door. So that's really how we're evaluating how much money to put out the door, and also helping the entrepreneurs figure out really where their weaknesses are. So if market is the area where they're weakest, we might throw some money out the door to help them do some work around addressing that market. If team is a weakness, we might help them put together a board of advisors, bring on some talent to help strengthen their team. So things like that, really tailoring the investments. Once we're satisfied they're a fit, we shoot them a link to an application and ask them to fill that out. Then we put it through a review, and depending upon the amount of money that they're seeking, there are different levels of diligence, as you might imagine. People who are seeking less money, we're going to do less diligence. We're less risk adverse when we're putting less money out the door. The higher amount of money that we put out, the more diligence we're going to do, and the more we're going to take risk into account. Then we'll make a decision on the funding. In the past, MTI funding decisions have taken anywhere from 6 weeks to 8 months. We're now looking at 2 weeks to 9 weeks for decisions for any of our programs, for any of our funding. So it's really going to be a lot more nimble, a lot more customer-centric. I think entrepreneurs and businesses will really appreciate that. And finally, MTI funding requires a certain level of reporting. Again, we're allocating taxpayer resources, so we need to make sure that we're good stewards of those funds. So we're requiring, as we always do, quarterly reporting from the applicants to make sure that they're achieving the milestones that they had hoped to achieve, and also annual reporting as well. So MTI's got a pretty diverse portfolio, and this gives you a little example of the kind of projects we've funded. So, with a lens towards that, don't necessarily think that there's an innovative project that you're made aware of that we might not fund, because we can fund a lot of different things. As you can see, innovations in gene sequencing and ocean microbial systems, guitar and surfboard manufacturing, candy bar manufacturing too, vodka from Maine potatoes, so we helped develop that product some years ago. Also algae cultivation and eel aquaculture, just to name a few. So a really varied portfolio, so I encourage everybody to give MTI a good look, regardless of what your innovation may be. MTI is a lot more than funding, and this is one of a quote from one of our portfolio companies, talks about how MTI really, aside from just funding, really helps to nurture these innovations and entrepreneurs and tries to help them to be as successful as possible. And again, we bring much more than money. As I mentioned, all of our support is now tailored to what entrepreneurs need. So no more trying to shoehorn them into a specific program because that's all we have available. Now we're looking at the innovation, we're looking at this venture investment readiness scale, and really trying to figure out where there are some weaknesses in the company and trying to help them fill that. MTI is committed to the venture success, and I think MTI is recognized by a lot of traditional lenders as providing critical validation to innovative technologies and companies. So I think MTI's stamp of approval, the funding that we provide, sometimes is a key characteristic to companies receiving follow-on funding from banks and investors. So just to drill down on this a little bit more, so we provide connections to advice and mentors and counsel. MTI actually has a small stable of e-residents. So these are former entrepreneurs, former executives who are under contract with MTI to meet with MTI portfolio companies to provide advice and assistance in any number of different things, financial assistance, marketing, manufacturing challenges. So we've got folks who are experts in any number of those fields and really provided a lot of value to our companies. SBIR, STTR funding, I don't know if people are familiar with that, but every year the federal government provides $2.5 billion in research and development funding nationally. And they do that through 11 different federal agencies. As you can imagine, applying for federal grants can be an arduous process, pretty bureaucratic, can take hundreds of hours to submit a federal grant application. MTI actually, again, has a group of contractors who are experts in helping people complete federal R&D grants. And I think we've got 5 people on staff, 1 to help with commercialization plans, 1 to help with budgets and federal indirect rates, which nobody knows about how to submit, but we've got somebody who can help you with that. We've got folks who will help do market research for innovations and try to pull reports together to complement federal grant applications. And we have a fair amount of success with this. In fiscal year 17, we helped attract almost $7 million in federal grant funding to the state of Maine. This past fiscal year, about $4 million. So it's really money well spent for these experts. They do have a pretty big impact on these applications. MTI, as I mentioned, also provides equity investments in companies. MTI's equity investment program is really a top-off program to MTI portfolio companies who are looking to scale. So what that means is if a company is looking to raise $1 million in equity investment and has raised $900,000 and is looking for that extra 100, MTI can play a role in helping to top off that investment round. Typically, what we're looking to do there is to follow a sophisticated lead investor who's already put a term sheet together and everything, and MTI can come in, help top off that round following those same terms negotiated by the lead investor. Again, MTI's brand is a pretty helpful tool when entrepreneurs and businesses are looking to attract other capital from traditional lenders and investors. Oops. So one of, it's probably arguably MTI's largest success to date is Vet's First Choice. I don't know if folks have heard of this company, but it's veterinary pharmacy platform technology. It's a company that MTI invested in 2009 when there were really two founders. That was it around this company. We put $500,000 in this company to help it test its value proposition and really try to scale and achieve market traction. That $500,000 investment, a couple of years later, they came to us and they said, geez, it was actually 4 years later, they came to MTI and they said, you know, we really appreciate that loan you gave us. We're growing. We're actually taking on some investment. We wonder if MTI would be willing to convert that loan into investment in the company. I wasn't there at the time. The CEO at the time made a wise choice, I think. Probably I would have done the same thing, which was, how about we convert half the investment and you pay us the other half back? So at the time, they paid half of it back. Half of it was converted into equity. A couple of years later, MTI put some follow-on investment in the company, a small amount. And last year, Vet's First Choice took on $223 million in new investment to really scale the company. And at that time, they took MTI out and paid MTI a 6x return on that money. So it was really, really a wise and prudent investment for MTI. This company now is building its new headquarters on the peninsula in Portland. They are going to have 1,000 employees in the city of Portland. They are going to be the 4th non-financial publicly traded company headquartered in the state of Maine, which is terrific news. You know, right now we've got WEX, IDEX, and ImmuCell. So this will be the 4th non-financial publicly traded company. And the good news in that is that of the 4 publicly traded companies that aren't banks in the state of Maine, MTI has helped grow 2 of them now. So really impressive impact. And this little note at the bottom says, you know, true to MTI's model, Vet's First Choice shared its success with Maine taxpayers by not only creating jobs and generating tax revenue, but by repaying MTI and providing MTI a return that we can now use to deploy to other innovators across the state of Maine. So really a great story for the state. So that's MTI in a nutshell. I'd welcome any questions. Hope you found this informative, but look forward. Yeah, Kim.
So, Brian, who vets the applications when they come in? I know you said that you meet with people, so do you invite them to apply, like that will work, you know, with a fit? And so you invite them to apply, and then who vets it? Is it staff, or do you have a board?
great question. So MTI has a 15-person board made up of public and private sector members. So the governor appoints 10 of the 15 members representing the private sector, all representing those 7 sectors we talked about. And then there's 5 public sector members, including people like me, a representative of the university, the community college, Office of Policy and Management, and somewhere else. But so 15-member board. The way our proposals are evaluated, traditionally, the reason we had all these deadlines and it took so long for us to evaluate stuff was because we've got 120 plus subject matter experts that volunteer their time to review proposals for MTI. And we would convene them 3 times a year, which is why there was kind of this bottleneck of decisions. We're still using those subject matter experts, but over the past year and a half, we really piloted this rolling process where we would pull together ad hoc review meetings with the tech boards based on whatever the technology was. We would find subject matter experts who had relevant experience, pull them together, do an ad hoc go-to-meeting call. It's much more efficient, gets us quicker turnarounds. It's really been good, and really pleased with that. We also do external reviews for some of the larger dollar amounts. So in addition to these in-state subject matter experts, we also send these things out to the American Association for the Advancement of Science, which has national experts that also will evaluate these proposals. We also send them out for financial reviews. So the Finance Authority of Maine has been great doing financial reviews for us. So there's really quite a bit of diligence, especially when we're talking about larger dollar amounts. When we're talking about 5,000, maybe a situation with staff and maybe 1 subject matter expert. But the more money we're talking about, the more diligence we're doing. That's a great question. So for our normal funding programs, we're normally $500,000 or less. We've made $1 million investment before, but that was unorthodox. Under the bond funded programs, this past year we actually made a $12.5 million award. We made a $9 million award. So we have made some rather large awards, but typically they're $500,000 or less. Elaine?
Along the innovation spectrum, I know there's fewer silos, less deadlines, but is there kind of a threshold for the amount of investment you would make at a concept versus research versus sustainability?
Yeah, so what Elaine asked, for those who couldn't hear in the back, was, is there a level of investment MTI is more comfortable making at the earlier stage of the continuum, the innovation continuum, as opposed to the later stages? And yes, absolutely. So we're sitting down with the customers, and we're going through this venture investment readiness index. We're looking at that, and that's really letting us know how advanced they are with their innovation and with their company. And that's really going to dictate what level of funding we're going to put out the door. So really, if we're looking at somebody who's just got an idea, we'll probably consider $5,000 or $10,000 to help them put a business plan together, do some market research, talk to customers. Do people even want this? We have a lot of people who have great ideas who come to us and say, everybody wants this. And we're like, well, who have you talked to? And they're like, oh, everybody wants it, trust me. And so we're really looking for people to go out and do some customer discovery, talk to their customers, find out if there's real demand, look at the size of the market, is it substantial? We're looking for impact in the state. So those are the kind of things that we're focused on. Mike?
Roger, just a guesstimate. Of the projects that we see, what percentage would you say is new technology that you've not seen before? And the other side of it is sort of like offshoots or reapplication of existing technology. What would you say, just as a guess?
Yeah. So MTI, so I would say a significant percentage is new technologies. I mean, that's what we're all about. We have a lot of people who come to MTI who are like, hey, if I only had this piece of equipment, we could be that much more efficient, we could sell that much more product. But MTI is really not in the business of providing funding for people to buy off-the-shelf equipment. If there's some level of innovation required to really optimize that equipment for a specific need in a business that may not be a plug-and-play situation, then we might consider funding it. But most of the stuff that we're funding is new technology, maybe a new iteration of an old technology, but generally new stuff. Garvin, do you have one?
For a potential applicant or grantee in the room, is it even possible, or is there a particular success factor or that kind of one big recommendation that you've seen a lot of applicants just fall in that trap that you would give to a future grantee or applicant? What's the one biggest piece of advice?
What's the one biggest piece of advice? As I said, talk to customers. People have a lot of great ideas, but if nobody's willing to buy it, then it really, really doesn't have any sort of impact. So I think, as you're putting together your innovative concept, really get out and talk to potential customers, people you think might want it, and get their take on, whether or not they would use it, how much they might be willing to pay for it, those types of things. So I think that's a really key thing, something we encounter quite a bit. So, and then, another thing we see consistently is, a lack of any sort of sophistication with financials. That's, a challenge for a lot of entrepreneurs and businesses. But the good thing is there's a lot of free resources out there that can help with that. Kim mentioned the small business development centers operate out of the chamber office. That's a great free resource to help people put together financial plans. SCORE has a really great chapter here in the state of Maine. So SCORE is another good group to look to. So those are some of the basic things that we see. Any other questions? Everybody asleep?
I'm actually just generally curious, out of kind of the family or the company profile, I know it's probably impossible to play favorites, but anyone that's surprised you the most over the course of the year?
We actually had two companies this past year, within the past couple of weeks, that they've struggled to gain traction. We've put a lot of resources in terms of e-residents. We've had a lot of different e-residents in trying to help these companies find market traction. And I have to say I was skeptical on a couple of them, and in the past couple of weeks, two different companies called up and said, hey, secured big sales, we've got 70 sales of our $40,000 product. Wouldn't have happened without MTI. If you guys hadn't badgered me, relentlessly, we would have never gotten to this point. And I think there's definitely a love-hate relationship with some entrepreneurs who are going through the system, because there's a little bit of tough love from MTI at times. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of them feel that it has a lot of value. And these two companies in particular, I was really pleasantly surprised, because I had my doubts over time. So it was really fulfilling to find out that they're doing well. Yeah.
You mentioned that you have to have one-to-one funding, right?
Yep.
Matching money. Do you ever see it where you guys will commit to funding if they get matching funding? Because your brand is really important, right?
Yeah.
So will you commit, potentially, and then allow them time to raise the other funds?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The bond-funded program, for example, we issued those awards as challenge grants. So we said, we're willing to make this award, but you've got to come up with a match within a certain period of time. So, and traditionally, we'll allot a certain number of months before somebody has to achieve that match. So yeah, we'll make contingent awards.
And it has to be a cash match?
Doesn't have to be cash match. Cash is king. We love cash match, but we'll also allow in-kind match as well. Anything else?
Real quick, just super curious, what software platform are you using to help with the application
Yeah. So MTI adopted a new platform 3 years ago, a grant management software platform called Blackbaud. It used, yeah, it was.
I work for Blackbaud.
Oh, you do? Oh, good.
Yeah, I was kind of digging a little. Yeah, I work for Razor's Edge, which is
No kidding. Yeah, so our product was GIFs, and then Blackbaud acquired GIFs recently, so Blackbaud is our supplier. You looking for work? We actually, the woman who runs our grant management system's actually relocating to another state, so we've got a vacancy. If there's somebody with experience in Blackbaud that happens to be in the room.
That was the best leading question I've ever heard. I do believe entrepreneur residents here at Bricks as well, so.
That's exciting. Yeah, they keep us. We're a little siloed, so the different products tend to be kind of self-contained. So I was curious, because I know we have a product that does exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
How neat.
Yeah, it's been great. That was a new platform for us. I think we brought it on 3 years ago, and it's still something we're learning how to completely utilize and to its maximum effect. But it's been really good. It's a good customer relation management tool, and also a good grants management tool. So it's been really helpful.
Awesome.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, great question. Thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for everybody joining us. Thank you so much, Brian. That was spectacular. Wonderful to hear about the new program rollout, the streamlinedness of it, and I know many of us in this room either look forward to continuing to work with you or work with you in the future. So thank you again to Brian. Thank you, everybody. Again, the second Thursday of every month. I do want to give a shout out to one of our sponsors and key partners, Thomas College Converge and Create Week, beginning November 16th and 17th, and we'll have a little formal, informal kickoff the night before on Thursday evening for Tech Night as well. So thank you so much. I think we still have plenty of pizza and cocktails, so enjoy yourself. Don't feel like you need to rush out. And certainly any other further up questions, follow up with us. Thank you so much. Cheers. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.